joining us today. I have your new book here, and I would love to know just what is the premise of your new book, Leading What Matters Most?
Well, thanks for having me. The premise is the story of a CEO, very successful CEO of a high-tech company, and she's run into some problems. The problem isn't with the product, the problem is with the people. She's getting poor engagement scores, she's getting people leaving, she's getting a disengagement on the workforce, and it's starting to affect quality, it's starting to affect service, and so she doesn't know what to do. She tries a couple of things and fails. So now she's really kind of worried. And she ends up bumping into a consultant who comes and says, okay, let me understand what the problem is. And she says, I just don't really feel like my people are fully engaged. They're working hard, but I don't think I'm getting the best out of them. And so he talks to her about the concept of releasing human potential. He said, people working hard and working well is great, but they want to contribute more. But your organization doesn't allow them to do that. And if you could, they would contribute more, the organization would be more successful, they would be more engaged, they'd be more excited about their job, they'd bring ideas forward and so on. So over the course of the book, she learns the power of truly releasing human potential and how to do it.
Really interesting. So what made you write this book?
Great question. I think that many organizations are very focused on their customers, which they should be. They're very focused on shareholder value, which they should be. They're very focused on the quality of their products. But fundamentally, what they're doing is they're managing their workforce to achieve those outcomes without realizing that the workforce is a tremendous asset. And organizations say, people are our greatest asset, but they don't treat them like that. They treat them like a very powerful resource, and they manage accordingly. So what I wanted to do was write a book that said, you have control over these folks, and they want to give you more. They want the organization to flourish. It gives them job security. It makes them proud to work for you. It lets the organization kind of do much better. But if you don't know how to get at that, then all that desire, that potential that they have is gone and is wasted. So organizations typically say, well, we make bicycles or we make yogurt. We're really good at that, and we care for our people and we manage our people well. But we don't know how to release human potential. Like, what does that mean? How do you do that? So they don't do it. And if they were to do it, then you would suddenly discover that this workforce is not only your greatest asset, it becomes a tremendous force to give you a competitive advantage, to give you innovation, to give you ideas. They're much more engaged. They're more excited about their job. But how do you do that? How do you actually do that? So I thought I would create this fictional CEO, Bridget, who's wrestling with that problem and then learns how to do it. I think, Tanya, a lot of organizations know that that potential is out there, and they realize that my people could be more engaged, and they could, not that they're not, they just could be more. I just don't know how to do it. But if I could do it, it would be worth it. So that was kind of the thinking.
All right, and I thank you for making this book available to me ahead of time, and I had an opportunity to read through it. And so the book talks about Bridget, this successful CEO, and she comes to this realization that her organization is just not structured itself to see or value, as you alluded to, the potential of the contribution of their people. So how crucial do you think it is to have that awareness, especially in today's world?
Yep. I think it's very crucial. I think competitive advantage can come from many areas. It can come from your products, your quality, your service, but it can also come from your people. And if you can tap into that, you have a way of beating your competitor if they're not as good at harnessing the potential of their workforce. So I think it's an incredibly important component of leadership. It's not the only aspect of it. I mean, you still have to worry about your customer. You still have to worry about quality and profit and so on. But you also should be as good at thinking about how do I get at everything that my people can contribute. So I think it's very important. I think it's a skill that is generally lacking, and organizations generally don't know how to acquire that skill. So therefore it just kind of goes out there as unrealized potential, but very important to acquire because it is a component of great leadership. Okay,
great. So you alluded to her, well, we talked about it being Bridget. And so as she transitions from being a more people-centric organization and wanting her organization to be that way, her executive plays a really key role. So why is that? Why is it that they play such a key role?
So let me explain it another way. Okay. I taught swimming for a long time. Right. And I taught children who were quite young, and one of the first things they've got to learn to do is put their head underwater, because that's a poor thing. But they don't want to put their head underwater. So how do you get them to do that? And what I do is I would drop a coin in the water, in the shallow end, and I would say, just go get the coin. So they would flail around. They're not swimming, but they would flail around, but they would end up at the bottom of the pool. And they would pick up the coin and say, when you get the coin, just look at me and come back up. So they would get the coin, they'd look at me, and they'd flail, and they would come back up. The issue here is the body follows the head. So when they drop the head to go for the coin, it doesn't matter what they do with their arms and legs, the body is going to follow. And when they look up, their head is up, and they're flailing around, the body goes up. So in exactly the same way, every organization has a head, which is typically the executive team. The body follows the head. So if you want an organization to change in some fashion, for example, we really want to harness the potential of our people, whatever that means, the executives have got to be seen to be leading the charge. Now, they have to do more than just be seen, they actually have to lead the charge. Because if they are simply seen, then it's just perception, it's not reality. But if the head, which are the executive team, demonstrate the behaviors that they want, the organization will follow. So releasing human potential is getting people to behave differently. The way they're behaving now is giving a result. When they behave differently, you get a different result. So if you teach them new behaviors and they adopt those new behaviors, and those behaviors are the type that get their full ability to the fore, let them contribute to the fullest, then you're releasing the potential. So you want them to behave differently. Well, the first thing they're going to do is look at their boss. Is my boss behaving differently? And their boss is going to look at their boss, and so on, until finally you're going to say, well, are the executives behaving that way? Are they actually living the kind of things that they are asking us to do? And if they are, then the organization will follow. So it is very important that the executives are there to model the behavior, to support it, to be available to help if necessary, but fundamentally to be the ones who are leading the charge around this new way of behaving. And if they are, the body will then follow.
Okay, so you talk about the executives leading this charge and the head their body following the head. So what role do the frontline leaders then play?
That is a great question. That is a great question. So let's say I'm in my first job and I've got a job in the warehouse. I'm 18 and I'm working in the warehouse. And I'm working for a 21-year-old who had my job 3 months ago. Okay, as far as I am concerned, that 21-year-old who is the supervisor of the warehouse, he's my boss. He is the company to me. He sets my goals. He evaluates whether I do a good job or a bad job. He provides whatever direction I'm going to need. He gives me the resources that I need. So I may never ever see an executive. They may be in a different city. They're certainly outside of my league. So my world is focused around my line manager, that 21-year-old supervisor. If that supervisor behaves in a certain fashion, I'm going to model on them because the supervisor is the head to me. So I'll do what the supervisor does. I'll think about the company the way the supervisor does. So the values of the company, the behaviors, all the things that supervisor does, I'm going to mimic. I'm going to assume that's the norm. So that puts a tremendously strong focus on the behavior of the supervisor. Are they actually behaving in a way that releases human potential? Well, they're going, I'm worried about the forklift, this releasing human potential. They've had no idea how to do that. So how can they learn that? Besides the fact we're going to have to teach them, one of the things they're going to do is look at their boss, who is the manager of the factory or the warehouse. And they're going to model on them and so on, all the way up. So every employee has a line manager. And if that line manager is not fully engaged in helping their employees behave differently, the way you want them to behave to release human potential, it won't happen. So the line manager becomes crucial. You cannot change a company by telling people what to do or hiring a consultant and just putting posters on the wall. You have to get the leaders to behave the way you want the people to behave. They don't know how to do that. So you don't only have to equip the frontline employee with the skills, you also have to equip their leaders with the skills, and show them how to lead so that those skills are actually demonstrated day to day. So they're very important.
Yeah, so cascading it down from your executives down to your frontline leaders and hitting every level of the leadership throughout the organization. So I just want to go back to the story. So as the story unfolds, a number of hurdles surface throughout the book. What do you feel are the most significant ones organizations face as they move towards a culture that is committed to truly harnessing the potential of their people?
Yep. In the book, Bridget faces a number of hurdles. I think there are three that are the most crucial. The first is getting the executives to actually be part of the solution. If they say, yes, we want you to go and release human potential and here's a check, go make it happen, it won't happen. If they are not involved, and so one of the things you need to help them, well, they're going to say, well, what do you want me to do differently? I'm successful and I'm great, and yes, I would like the potential of the people to be realized, but what do you want me to do? So you have to equip them and then see them go and demonstrate the skills that you give them. Without the executives, you're lost. That's the first thing. The second thing is you need to teach the new behaviors. Because when you talk about releasing human potential, it's not some abstract thing. It translates into practical things. How do we function in our team? Is our team good or great? Well, if you want to have the very best out of that team, they're going to have to behave in a way that probably they're not behaving now. If you want people to contribute, how do you get their input? What do you do when you get their input? What do you do with it? How should they present it? How should the leader respond once they get the input? So regardless of the actual goal of releasing human potential, it translates into several distinct behaviors. We want you to do this, not that. We want you to do this, not that. And we want to encourage those behaviors. So you have to train them. So again, I think the second hurdle is recognizing that you can't just ask people to behave differently without showing them how. Specifically, do this, not that. And then the third step, which is probably the third hurdle, which is probably the biggest one, is staying the course. So let's go back to my swimming analogy. I'm teaching my grandchildren to swim. So right now, they're learning that you swim by going forward, but they keep their head out of the water. So when your head is out of the water, it's very hard to swim well because the head tends to sink the body. You've got to let the head nestle in the water. So I'll go out and I'll work with them and I'll say, okay, you've got to put the head in the water. And that's not natural for them, but we work on it. And so they kind of get the idea. I go in and get a Coke and I come back out 10 minutes later and they're swimming, but their head is no longer in the water. It's back out again. Not because they chose to disobey me or didn't think that I was right, but for months they've been swimming with their head out of the water. And I just spent a short time teaching them a different way to do it. It's not natural for them. It's not comfortable for them. So they revert to their old way. So then I have to say, okay, while I'm drinking my Coke, I've got to say, okay, let's go back, let me show you. And so I have to constantly be working with them until it becomes natural to swim with your head in the water. It's exactly the same in an organization. If I teach new behaviors, people will begin to adopt them. But they'll run into problems, they'll run into hurdles, and they will revert back to the old ways. Sure. Leaders will make mistakes, and people will criticize those mistakes. Oh, well, they're not really committed to the new way of behaving. But it's not that they're not committed, it's just they reverted back to type. So you have to stay the course. But you get early wins, you get excited, look at what's happening, and you take the pressure off, making sure that the focus is on we are going to all adapt and learn the new behaviors and live that way. So unless you are willing to stay the course, it becomes flavor of the month and it doesn't work. So you need your executives to be leading the charge, you need to equip the people with the skills, and then you need to be patient until the skills become habitual.
Right, that's what I was just going to say. So you need to be patient. Yeah. It's required. Yeah.
Yeah. And in the book, in fact, Bridget bumps into someone who isn't patient and runs into a problem.
Yeah, yeah. So you highlight the power of experiential learning as the key to accelerating the change that Bridget wants to make.
Yeah.
So what makes this such an effective way to really change people's behavior?
Yeah, great question. Many years ago when I was going to university, I hated being lectured at. Firstly, I can't remember half of what they say. And if you then translate that sort of learning methodology into corporate world, you get PowerPoints, and then they give you binders, and you're supposed to reference the binder, and you can't find the binder. But it's all knowledge. So the knowledge is good. It's not that the training is bad, but what am I supposed to do with the knowledge? So sometimes they will try to, you'll try to get people to understand it better. You'll do a case study or a role play, but it's still fundamentally knowledge transfer. To change behavior, I have to have a conviction that the new way of behavior is better than the old way. If I don't have a conviction, it's just, okay, well, yes, that's a point of view, but I'm comfortable with my way. So the conviction is important. And secondly, I actually need to understand the impact of the new behavior. So how do I do that? The only way to do that is to discover for myself the power of these new ways of behaving. So how do I discover it? You can't just lecture me. I've got to discover it. So experiential learning puts me in a scenario that is totally unrelated to work. I walk into the classroom and I might be rescuing a space station in space, or I might be racing across the desert, or I might be building something for a sailing operation. I go, what does this have to do with my day-to-day work? But the experience, which you would think of as a pretty sophisticated game, is fun, it's engaging, it's exciting, it's challenging. I go through it with a group of people, so there's safety, there's psychological safety, I'm not getting singled out. And at the end, my team gets a score. And the facilitator then says, okay, let's talk about this game. You probably wonder why you were rescuing somebody in space for the last hour and a half. Let's talk about that. How did you do? And inevitably, they didn't do nearly as well as they could have done. Inevitably. So the facilitator then shows them how they could have done better in the game by adopting a different approach, a different set of behaviors than they adopted. Now, bear in mind, Tanya, they went into the game with the skills that they have and the approach that they take, the way they do every day on the job. It's not a case study, it's not a role play, it's me. And I've now got this problem with my colleagues, and we solve the problem using the skills we have. But the facilitator says, but wait a minute, if you had different skills, you could have been very different in terms of the achievement that you got, the outcome you got. People go, yeah, you're right. I could have. Okay, so let's just chat about that for a minute. You got a certain outcome because you behaved in a certain way. If you behaved in a different way, you would have gotten a different outcome. Yeah. Okay, you understand. This game is an exact replica of what you do on the job because we select an experience that fits their world. And so now the things which you learned in the game, let's talk about how those same principles could apply back on the job. So, oh, yeah. Well, what would have been the impact back on the job if you had applied those new ways of behaving that would have made you successful in the game back on the job? People, yeah, that would make a huge difference. So what I've done is I've built conviction about the value of the new ways of behaving, and they've discovered for themselves. And then they go, okay, well, yeah, you're right. So now they're willing to adopt those new behaviors. Now, you can't just stop with the experience. You then have to say, okay, let's codify. How do you do it and what do you do? And you move more into a more classical way of, okay, let's now translate that appreciation into the day-to-day reality. But the experiential learning component is vital if you want to change behavior. And if you want to change behavior, then you've got to get people to come and realize that there's value in it and know what to do differently. Mm-hmm. But if you get that changed behavior allows people to perform to their potential because you're changing the behavior in a different way so that's more related to getting their potential. Mm-hmm. So people go, okay, wow, I could contribute a whole lot more. And you sit back as the organization and say, we are releasing human potential by giving people a conviction that there's a different way to behave, the skills on how to do it, and they've discovered it for themselves, which is the power of experiential learning.
Well, and what I loved what you talked about is how you apply it to their actual everyday. So you take that experience and they have the information and then they can apply it and they know how to do it so they can go to work the next day and actually use it the next day,
yep.
Which is fantastic.
Absolutely, I have to do that.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So I just want to go back to the title of this book. So why did you choose this specific title?
Yeah. Writing a book, it's hard to pick the title. I think if you're running an organization or if you're in an organization, your priority is shareholder value. The shareholders are looking for a return on their investment. And that translates into things like great customer service, translates into great quality, it translates into efficiency, it might translate into making an acquisition or divestiture or something. So organizational leaders are leading towards that outcome. But every outcome in every organization is as a result of what people do. So if you want to change the outcome, higher quality, better service, better return on profit, you need to change what people do. If you change what people do, you change the outcome. So leading requires a focus on quality and a focus on service and a focus on safety. But what matters most is leading the people in a way that they can contribute to their fullest so that those outcomes are as great as possible. So if, for example, I am leading people so that their potential around ensuring the workplace is 100% safe results in a safe workplace, which is critical for shareholder value and the health of the company. So the title of the book is less about the only thing to lead is people or people are the answer. People are simply the things that matter most, but many other things matter, and you have to worry about all those other things. But if you can get at the people and release the potential of the workforce, everything else then follows. So that's how I came up with the title.
That's wonderful, because as you said, you know, as people are valued, they can bring more to what they do every day.
Exactly.
So this has been great. I have one final question for you. So for those readers interested in learning more about how to achieve similar results in their own organizations or within their own functional areas, what would you suggest would be the next steps for them?
Yep. I think there's really two options. If you know how to do this, I would say go do it. Many organizations have the capability within themselves to go and do this. If you don't know how to do it, I would say find someone who can. Now, you're talking Eagle's Flight, and we do this. I think we do this really well, hence the writing of the book. I think there are other organizations that do it. So I would love people to say, wow, that's great. We'll call up Eagle's Flight and see if they can help us. But one way or another, the issue is do something about it. Don't just realize that there would be great value if you could release the potential of and not how to do it and so say, well, I don't know what to do. I would say get help. Call us, call someone else, but find someone who can help you do that. The benefit to doing that is not just the superficial benefit of obviously improving quality and service, but your workforce engages with you. And they share what their experiences are with their friends, and then you get to recruit more people in, and people don't leave, they come in, and so the benefits are huge. So I would say if this is something that you feel valuable and you don't know how to do it, go get help, find an organization that can help you and can guide you through it. But the organization needs to guide you. They can't do it for you. See my earlier comments, it must be led by the executives, they must be equipped with skills. Your organization has to come almost as a shadow to help your organization be successful. They can't just go and do it for you.
That's great. Thanks so much for your time,
My
Philip.
pleasure.